EastEnders Nigel Bates heads off on a pilgrimage with Phil Mitchell next week in a quest to find a time capsule from their youth. As the best mates escape Walford for a while, the trip down memory lane prompts a heart-to-heart. Why is Nigel pulling away from wife Julie? This adventure might be the last one for poor Nigel, says our EastEnders source. It's a significant moment for him and Phil to strengthen their bond. But it also proves to Nigel that his memory doesn't always fail him. When the week begins, Nigel is devastated to realize he left the gate open and overnight the chickens have been eaten by foxes. Blaming himself and his failing memory, Nigel becomes distressed as he argues with Julie over their loss. Later that day, Nigel becomes suspicious by the number of calls Julie is receiving. She claims the calls are about a prospective job opportunity, but something about their conversation triggers old memories and feelings. Nigel is floored by what he remembers, explains our insider. He doesn't want to be anywhere near Julie and begs Phil to take him away from Walford. Just what has he remembered? To keep Nigel happy, the two men take a drive to the countryside, on a trip down memory lane. Nigel still has very vivid memories of their youth and convinces Phil they need to find a time capsule that they buried with Grant when they were lads. Phil does his best to dissuade Nigel from the mission, certain it'll be a wild goose chase, but he's amazed when Nigel leads him to the exact spot where they buried the capsule all those years ago. As the friends dig up the box, they have an emotional chat. When Nigel and Phil return the next day, outcast Julie struggles as she feels like a third wheel to their tight-knit friendship. Ahead of her job interview, Julie is a bag of nerves, but the mood is lifted as Phil and Nigel help her prepare. However, the improved atmosphere is shattered when Julie is forced to cancel her interview as Nigel needs looking after. After mistaking George for an ex-lover of Julie's, Nigel becomes troubled. With much deeper issues in Nigel and Julie's marriage than first thought, can they overcome their tensions? EastEnders spoilers. Nigel Bates' pilgrimage with Phil Mitchell sparks painful marriage truths. Walford is never short of drama, but next week's EastEnders episodes deliver one of the most poignant and emotional storylines of the year. Longtime fan favorite Nigel Bates takes center stage as his health, his marriage, and his lifelong friendship with Phil Mitchell are all put under the spotlight. In scenes that will both warm hearts and break them, Nigel convinces Phil to join him on a nostalgic countryside trip, one that unearths both literal and metaphorical time capsules from their past. But behind the laughter and old stories lies a much darker truth. Nigel's memory isn't what it used to be, his marriage to Julie is crumbling under the strain, and his future in Walford is looking increasingly uncertain. According to an EastEnders insider, this adventure might be the last one for poor Nigel. It's a significant moment for him and Phil to strengthen their bond. But it also proves to Nigel that his memory doesn't always fail him. Sadly, his marriage doesn't look as strong. So what exactly sparks this heartbreaking pilgrimage? Let's break down everything you can expect in next week's dramatic episodes. Nigel's devastating mistake at home. When the week begins, Nigel is already struggling. He's been working hard to keep his life steady, but his ongoing memory lapses have left him rattled and insecure. That vulnerability comes crashing down in a devastating way when he forgets to close the garden gate overnight. By the following morning, tragedy strikes. The chickens he and Julie had been looking after are dead, mauled by foxes. The sight leaves Nigel distraught. He blames himself entirely, his guilt only heightened by his awareness that his memory is failing him more often than he wants to admit. Instead of being able to shrug it off as a simple mistake, Nigel spirals into distress. His confrontation with Julie over the chickens quickly escalates into something deeper. Nigel lashes out, accusing himself of being useless, while Julie tries to reassure him but can't hide her own frustration. This isn't just about chickens, says our source. It's about Nigel's fear of losing control of his life, and Julie's fear that she can't cope with what lies ahead. They're clashing, not just over a mistake, but over what it represents for their marriage. Suspicion creeps in. Later that same day, Nigel's anxieties are triggered again when he notices the number of phone calls Julie is receiving. She insists they're nothing more than a possible job opportunity, but something about the tone of her conversation unsettles him. It sparks long-buried memories in Nigel's mind, connections he can't quite shake. And in that instant, a flood of emotions overwhelms him. He doesn't want to be anywhere near Julie, explains our insider. He feels betrayed, even though Julie hasn't done anything wrong. What Nigel has remembered is huge for him, and it changes the way he looks at his wife. Consumed by confusion, Nigel turns to the one person he feels he can still trust completely, Phil Mitchell. In an emotional plea, Nigel begs Phil to take him away from Walford, if only for a few days. A road trip into the past. Phil, though wary, agrees to humor his old mate. He knows Nigel needs a break, and so the pair set off on a countryside drive. What starts as a distraction soon becomes a mission when Nigel insists they must find the time capsule they buried as lads with Grant Mitchell. At first, Phil is skeptical. He thinks Nigel's just chasing ghosts, says our source. It's been decades since they were kids, and the idea that they could find a little box in the middle of nowhere seems ridiculous. But Nigel is surprisingly sharp when it comes to this particular memory. Despite his recent lapses, he vividly recalls the exact field, the tree they marked, and the precise spot where they dug the hole. To Phil's astonishment, Nigel leads him straight to it. And after some effort, the two men dig up the time capsule, opening a literal box of their shared history. Inside are scraps of the past, old toys, notes to their future selves, and a few trinkets that meant the world to them as boys. For Nigel, it's proof that his memory hasn't completely deserted him. For Phil, it's a touching reminder of the boyhood bond he's often tried to bury under his hard exterior. As they sit together in the quiet countryside, the men open up. Phil lets his guard down, while Nigel admits his deepest fears. It's an intimate moment of brotherhood, two men who've weathered everything from marriages to deaths to betrayals, reconnecting over who they used to be. Julie feels like an outsider. Back in Walford, Julie is left to pick up the pieces. She's already nervous about a potential job interview that could give her a fresh start, but she feels increasingly like a third wheel in Nigel and Phil's renewed friendship. When the men return the following day, she's grateful for their support as they help her prepare. Phil, surprisingly tender, offers practical advice, while Nigel cheers her on with genuine pride. For a moment, the atmosphere lifts, and the household feels united again. But that fragile sense of harmony doesn't last. A shattering setback. Julie is devastated when she has to cancel her interview at the last minute. The reason? Nigel once again needs her help. In a particularly troubling moment, Nigel mistakes George Knight for one of Julie's ex-lovers. The mix-up rattles everyone involved, with Nigel becoming increasingly agitated and Julie caught in the middle of his paranoia. The incident forces Julie to face the truth she's been avoiding. Nigel's condition is worsening, and their marriage is under strain in ways neither of them wanted to admit. Nigel and Julie's problems are much deeper than just a few arguments, says our insider. It's about trust, memory, love, and fear. And the big question is whether they can overcome it together, or whether this is the beginning of the end. What does the future hold? As Nigel's journey continues, fans are left wondering, is this truly his last great adventure? His pilgrimage with Phil brought joy, nostalgia, and connection, but it also highlighted just how fragile his present really is. For Phil, the experience is equally significant. Known for his toughness and emotional walls, Phil has been forced to confront the importance of his bond with Nigel, and the reality that his old mate may not be around forever. For Julie, the storyline sets up a heartbreaking crossroads. Can she continue to stand by Nigel as his health declines, or will she be pushed away by the man he is becoming? One thing is certain. EastEnders is preparing fans for some of its most emotional episodes in years, with Nigel Bates at the center of the storm. Extended analysis. Why this story matters. The EastEnders writers have always excelled at weaving nostalgia into present-day drama. By bringing back the idea of a childhood time capsule, they've not only given Nigel and Phil a heartfelt trip down memory lane but also used it as a clever metaphor for memory itself, fragile, buried, and yet still powerful when unearthed. Nigel's struggle with memory loss echoes the soap's history of tackling real, difficult subjects with compassion. It's not just about one man forgetting the chickens or confusing George with someone else. It's about the fear of losing oneself, the toll it takes on relationships, and the importance of friendship in dark times. Fans online have already begun speculating whether Nigel's storyline is a stepping stone to a permanent exit. While nothing has been confirmed, insiders hint that this could be a farewell arc for the beloved character. If so, his time capsule adventure with Phil could stand as one of his most iconic storylines. Conclusion. Next week's episodes of EastEnders promise nostalgia, heartbreak, and powerful performances as Nigel Bates' story unfolds. From the tragic loss of the chickens to the emotional unearthing of a time capsule, from Julie's increasing frustration to Phil's rare vulnerability, this storyline blends humor, history, and heartache in a way only EastEnders can.